Imagine, the one person who's supposed to protect your soul is the same person who presses razor-sharp claws to your throat and whispers the word every mated wolf dreads most. Traitor. My alpha king, my mate, believed I betrayed our sacred bond. He accused me. He threatened to end me, right there under the full moon. His claws drew my blood while the mate bond screamed that he was still mine. But in that exact moment of heartbreak, I looked him in the eyes, and instead of begging for my life, I dropped the one truth that could destroy him worse than any lie ever could. Chapter 1. Whispers of the Moonlit Betrayal. The full moon hung low over the ancient forest, casting silver threads through the canopy like a lover's desperate grasp. I stood at the edge of the clearing, my heart pounding in rhythm with the distant howls of the pack. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, mingled with something sharper, his scent. Damien, my alpha king, the one whose bond had woven into my soul like vines around an old oak. We'd been mated for barely a year, but in that time, he'd become my world, fierce protector, tender lover, the man whose touch ignited fires I never knew existed. Tonight was supposed to be our sacred ritual, a renewal of the mate bond under the goddess's gaze. I'd dressed in the flowing white gown he loved, the one that clung to my curves like mist on a riverbank. My fingers trembled as I adjusted the silver pendant at my throat, a gift from him on our marking night. The memory flooded me, his lips on my neck, fangs grazing skin, the exquisite pain blending into pleasure as he claimed me. "You're mine," he'd growled, voice rough with desire, and I'd arched into him, whispering, "Run forever, run." But as I waited, a chill slithered down my spine. The pack's elders had whispered warnings all week, rogues encroaching on our borders, secrets festering like wounds. I pushed the thoughts away, focusing on the anticipation bubbling inside me. Damien would arrive any moment, his massive wolf form shifting to reveal the man, whose eyes burned with hunger for me alone. Footsteps crunched on fallen leaves. And there he was, tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair tousled by the wind, those piercing blue eyes locked on mine. But something was wrong. His jaw was set in a hard line, muscles coiled like a predator ready to strike. No smile, no warmth, just raw simmering rage. "Isabella," he snarled, my name a curse on his lips. He closed the distance in 3 strides, his hand shooting out to grip my arm. Not gently, like the nights we'd tangled in our bed, bodies slick and breathless. This was bruising, possessive in the worst way. "Damien, I started. But he cut me off, shoving me back against a tree. The bark bit into my skin through the thin fabric, a sharp contrast to the heat radiating from him. "Are you dare ask?" His voice was low, dangerous, laced with the growl of his inner wolf. "After what you've done? Betraying our bond, the sacred tie the moon goddess herself forged?" My breath caught, confusion twisting into fear. "What are you talking about?" "I would never, lies." And he leaned in, his face inches from mine, breath hot against my cheek. I could smell the whiskey on him, mixed with his natural musk that always made my knees weak. Even now, in this storm of anger, my body betrayed me, a flush creeping up my neck as memories flashed. His hands exploring every inch of me, whispers of mine turning into moans under the stars. He pulled a crumpled letter from his pocket, thrusting it at me. "This was found in your chambers. Correspondence with the rogues, planning to undermine me, to shatter our pack from within. How long, Isabella? How many times have you spread your legs for them while I fought for us?" The words hit like claws raking my heart. Pain exploded in my chest, sharp, unrelenting. This couldn't be real. I'd never seen that letter before. Someone had forged it, twisted it to poison him against me. Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back, refusing to crumble. "Damien, listen to me. This is a setup. I love you. Our bond, it's everything." He laughed, a bitter sound that echoed through the trees, but his eyes flickered with something deeper. Hurt, buried under the fury. For a split second, I saw the man I'd fallen for, the one who'd held me through nightmares, whose gentle strokes after passion made me feel cherished. But then his wolf surged forward, eyes glowing amber, his claws extended sharp and gleaming in the moonlight, pressing against my throat just enough to draw a thin line of blood. The sting was nothing compared to the agony in my soul. "You threaten me? Your mate?" My voice cracked, a mix of sorrow and defiance. Inside, my wolf whined, the bond pulling taut like a string about to snap. Yet even as fear coiled in my belly, a forbidden heat stirred, his proximity, the raw power of him, reminding me of stolen moments in the throne room, where he'd pinned me against the wall, claiming me with urgent thrusts while the pack waited outside. "If you're a traitor, the bond means nothing," he hissed, claws digging deeper. I'll end this now, rip out the rot before it spreads. Panic surged, but so did a spark of anger, hot, empowering. He didn't know the truth I held, the secret I'd uncovered weeks ago while sorting through old pack archives. His mother, Victoria, the revered Dowager Luna, had been entangled in a forbidden affair with Marcus, the rogue pack leader. Letters, meetings in the shadows, proof of her betrayal that made this accusation against me look like child's play. I'd kept it hidden, out of respect for Damien, hoping to spare him the pain. But now it was my shield. With a trembling hand, I pushed his claws away, ignoring the trickle of blood down my collarbone. You want betrayal? Fine, but it's not mine. My voice steadied, fueled by the ache in my heart and the quiet triumph of truth. Your mother, Victoria, she's the one who's been sleeping with Marcus. For years, I have proof, letters, witnesses. She's the rot, Damien. Not me. His eyes widened, claws retracting as shock replaced rage. The bond hummed between us, a painful melody of doubt and lingering desire. He stepped back, chest heaving, and for a moment the air crackled with unspoken need. Even in betrayal's shadow, I wanted him. Wanted to pull him close. Taste the salt of his skin. Lose myself in the rhythm of our bodies as we had so many times before. But the hurt ran deep. Believe me or not, I whispered, tears finally spilling. But if you raise those claws again, you'll lose more than a mate. He stared, torn, the moon illuminating the conflict on his face. And in that suspended breath, a sad smile tugged at my lips, painful, yes, but laced with the sweet irony of fate. The man who'd made me feel alive now stood as my greatest wound. Yet exposing the truth felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. As leaves rustled in the wind, I turned and walked away, leaving him in the clearing, the weight of secrets hanging heavy between us. The pack house loomed ahead, its stone walls a fortress of lies and loyalties. I slipped inside, my gown torn and stained, heart a storm of sorrow and subtle joy. Sorrow for the bond fracturing under mistrust. Joy in the strength I'd found to fight back. In my chambers, I collapsed onto the bed, fingers tracing the mark on my neck. His mark. Memories assaulted me. Our first night, bodies entwined in a frenzy of heat. He'd been gentle at first, lips mapping my skin, building tension until I begged. Then with a growl, he'd taken me hard and deep, waves of pleasure crashing until we both shattered, laughing breathlessly in the aftermath. Now that laughter felt like a distant dream. Pain twisted in my gut, but beneath it, a flicker of hope smiled through, like sunlight piercing storm clouds. Maybe this revelation would shatter the illusions, force us to rebuild stronger. Or maybe it would end us. Either way, I wouldn't be the victim. A knock echoed at the door. Isabella? Damien's voice raw and uncertain. I sat up, wiping my tears, a mix of dread and anticipation warming my skin. The night was far from over. Chapter 2. Shadows of Doubt. The knock lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. Isabella froze on the edge of the bed, her torn gown pooling around her like spilled moonlight. Her pulse thundered, part fear, part something dangerously close to longing. The bond still pulsed between them, a living thread that refused to snap, tugging at her even now. Isabella, Damien repeated, voice rougher this time, cracked at the edges. Open the door, please. She almost laughed at the please, so unlike the Alpha King who just pressed claws to her throat. But the sound caught in her chest, turning into a quiet sob she swallowed down. She rose slowly, bare feet silent on the cold stone floor, and cracked the door just enough to see him. He looked wrecked. Rain had started outside, plastering his dark hair to his forehead, water dripping from his jaw. Those blue eyes, usually storm-sharp, were shadowed with something raw. Regret, maybe, or the first cracks of realization. His shirt clung to his chest, outlining every hard line of muscle she'd traced with her fingers 100 times. You shouldn't be here, she said softly, but she didn't slam the door. Couldn't. The bond hummed louder in the silence, warm despite everything. I had to see you. He leaned one forearm against the frame, not pushing in, just there. Close enough that she could smell rain and pine and him. What you said about my mother was the truth. Her voice trembled, but she held his gaze. I didn't want to hurt you with it. I kept it buried because I thought loving you meant protecting you from pain. His laugh was bitter, short. And look how well that worked. He dragged a hand through his wet hair. I almost killed you tonight. My own mate. Because I believed lies over the woman who... He stopped, throat working. Isabella felt the ache bloom fresh in her chest. Sad. So deeply sad for the man standing there, stripped of his armor. Yet beneath it, a tiny, stubborn smile threatened. He was here. Not raging, not accusing, just broken. And that felt like the first real victory of the night. "Come in," she whispered before she could talk herself out of it. Before the guards see their king looking like a drowned wolf. He stepped inside, dripping on the rug. The door clicked shut, sealing them in the dim glow of the single lantern. Tension thickened the air, heavy with unsaid words and remembered touches. She backed up instinctively until her thighs hit the bedpost. Damien didn't move closer at first. He just stood there, eyes tracing her. The blood dried on her throat, the tear tracks on her cheeks, the way the gown gaped at her shoulder, exposing skin he'd once kissed reverently. "I'm sorry," he said finally, the words scraping out like they hurt. "I was blind, furious. The letter, it looked so real. And the thought of you with someone else. Stop." She held up a hand, palm trembling. "Don't say it. I don't want to hear how you'd tear apart anyone who touched what's yours. Not tonight." He flinched but nodded. Silence stretched, painful and electric. Then he moved. Slow, deliberate, like approaching a wounded animal. When he reached her, he lifted a hand to her neck, thumb brushing the shallow cut his claws had left. She shivered at the contact, hating how her body still responded, how heat pooled low in her belly despite the hurt. "Does it sting?" he murmured. "Everything stings," she answered honestly. Tears welled again. "But mostly here." She pressed her hand over her heart. His forehead dropped to hers, eyes closing. "I know." For a long moment they just breathed together. Rain drumming on the windows, thunder rolling distant. Then his mouth brushed her temple, soft, almost reverent. "Let me make it right. Please." She wanted to push him away. Wanted to scream that one apology couldn't erase the terror of claws at her throat. But the bond. Gods. The bond sang for him. And beneath the pain, a quiet happiness flickered. He was fighting for her. For them. She tilted her head, lips grazing his jaw. "Words aren't enough, Damien." His breath hitched. Then his hands were on her waist, lifting her effortlessly onto the edge of the bed. He stepped between her thighs, not crowding, but close enough that she felt every inch of his heat through soaked fabric. "I don't deserve to touch you," he rasped. But his fingers were already sliding up her arms, gentle now, tracing goosebumps. "But if you'll let me, just for a moment." She should say no, should send him away to stew in his guilt. Instead, she cupped his face, thumbs brushing the stubble on his cheeks. "One moment," she breathed. His mouth crashed to hers, hungry, desperate, tasting of rain and regret. She gasped into the kiss, fingers threading into his wet hair, pulling him closer. His tongue swept in, claiming, but slower this time, savoring. Hands roamed, his palms sliding up her thighs, bunching the gown higher, hers clutching his shoulders, nails digging in just enough to remind him she wasn't fragile. He groaned against her lips, pressing forward until she felt the hard length of him against her core. Even through layers, the friction sent sparks racing up her spine. Memories flooded, nights when he'd taken her slow and deep, whispering filthy promises until she shattered around him. But tonight wasn't about release, not yet. His mouth trailed down her throat, careful over the cut, licking softly as if he could heal it with his tongue. She arched, a soft whimper escaping. "Damien." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes, dark, stormy, filled with something close to worship. "Tell me to stop." She didn't. Instead, she tugged his shirt open, buttons scattering. Her palms flattened over his chest, feeling the rapid thud of his heart. "Don't stop," she whispered. "But don't think this fixes anything. I know." His voice was gravel. He kissed her again, deeper, hands slipping beneath the gown to caress bare skin. Fingers danced along her ribs, thumbs brushing the undersides of her breasts until her nipples peaked, aching. She rocked against him instinctively, seeking more friction, more of him. Thunder cracked outside, mirroring the storm inside her. Pain crashing against pleasure, sorrow tangling with joy. She smiled against his mouth, small and sad and real. This man had nearly destroyed her tonight. And yet here they were, clinging to each other like lifelines. His hand slid between her thighs, finding her slick and ready despite everything. He groaned low in his throat, circling slowly, teasing. "Still mine," he murmured against her ear. Not possessive this time, almost reverent. "Even after I failed you." She bit his shoulder to muffle a moan, hips lifting into his touch. "Prove it," she challenged, voice breaking. "Prove your worth forgiving." He did, fingers sliding inside her, curling just right, thumb pressing her clit in slow, deliberate circles. She cried out softly, head falling back. He kissed along her collarbone, tasting salt and skin, building her higher until her thighs trembled. But just as the coil inside her tightened to breaking, a sharp knock shattered the moment. "My king," a guard's urgent voice from the hall. "Rogues at the northern border. They're not retreating. They're calling your name." Damien froze, forehead pressed to hers, breathing ragged. His hand stilled inside her, but he didn't pull away yet. Isabella's eyes fluttered open, hazy with need and sudden dread. "Go," she whispered even as her body protested. He withdrew slowly, reluctantly, pressing one last kiss to her swollen lips. "This isn't over," he vowed, voice thick. "Not us, not tonight." She nodded, tears mixing with the flush on her cheeks. Sad for the interruption, happy for the promise flickering back to life. He straightened his shirt as best he could, grabbed his cloak and paused at the door. "Stay inside, lock it, I'll come back." Then he was gone, leaving her aching, breathless, and alone with the echo of his touch. Outside, howls rose, rogue howls laced with challenge. Isabella touched her lips, a bittersweet smile curving them despite the fresh fear curling in her gut. She crossed to the window, watching lightning illuminate the forest. And there, half hidden among the trees, a shadow moved, too deliberate, too watching. A messenger, rogue colors on his cloak. He held up a sealed scroll, then vanished into the dark. Her heart stuttered. Whatever came next, the shadows were deepening. And the truth she'd uncovered might not be the only secret ready to tear them apart. Chapter 3. Fractured Alliances. The scroll in the rogue messenger's hand had vanished into the night like a bad dream, but its weight remained pressed against Isabella's ribs. She stood motionless at the window long after the shadow dissolved into the trees, fingers curled so tightly around the sill that her knuckles ached white. Outside, the storm had settled into a steady, mournful rain, each drop tapping the glass like fingers begging to be let in. She should have run after the messenger, demanded answers, burned the scroll unread. Instead, she turned away, crossed the room on legs that felt borrowed, and sank onto the velvet chaise by the hearth. The fire had burned low, casting trembling gold across her skin. She drew her knees up, wrapped her arms around them, and let the silence swallow her. Damien would be at the northern border by now, claws out, voice thundering orders. Part of her wanted to be there beside him, shoulder to shoulder, the way mates were meant to stand. The other part, the bruised and bleeding part, wanted to lock every door and never let him near her heart again. The bond pulsed anyway. Steady, stubborn. A quiet ache that said he's still yours, even when every rational thought screamed otherwise. A soft knock, different this time, hesitant, pulled her from the haze. "Who is it?" Her voice came out thinner than she intended. "Victoria." Isabella's breath snagged. The Dowager Luna. Damien's mother. The woman whose secret affair had become the sharpest weapon in her arsenal tonight. For one wild heartbeat, she considered pretending to be asleep. Then she rose, smoothed her ruined gown as best she could, and opened the door. Victoria stood in the corridor like a ghost made of moonlight and grief. Her silver-streaked hair was pinned severely, but strands had escaped, clinging damply to her temples. Her eyes, Damien's eyes, the same piercing blue, were red-rimmed, swollen. She looked smaller than Isabella had ever seen her. "May I come in?" The question was barely above a whisper. Isabella stepped aside without a word. Victoria entered slowly, as though the room might collapse if she moved too quickly. She stopped in the center, hands clasped so tightly the knuckles blanched. "I know what you told him," she said without preamble. "About Marcus. About me." Isabella crossed her arms over her chest, a shield against whatever came next. "I told him the truth. Nothing more. Nothing less." Victoria's gaze dropped to the floor. "You had every right." The admission hung between them. Simple, devastating. Isabella waited. She would not make this easier. After a long silence, Victoria lifted her chin. Tears glittered but did not fall. "I never meant for it to touch you. Or him. I thought I could keep the two worlds separate. The pack. The heart. I was wrong." "You were wrong," Isabella echoed, softer now, the anger fraying at the edges. She hadn't expected contrition. She'd braced for denial, for venom, for the cold dignity of a Luna who'd once ruled this house with iron grace. Instead, Victoria looked broken. "I loved your father-in-law," Victoria continued, voice cracking on the memory. "Truly, fiercely. But after he died, the emptiness was unbearable. Marcus, he was there during the border skirmishes. He listened when no one else would. One night turned into two, then weeks, then years. I told myself it was only comfort, only loneliness. But comfort became craving, and craving became betrayal." Isabella's throat tightened. She wanted to hate this woman, needed to. Yet the raw honesty in Victoria's voice kept slicing deeper wounds, wounds of recognition. "I understand loneliness," Isabella said quietly. "More than you know." Victoria's eyes searched hers. "Do you hate me?" "I don't know what I feel." Isabella sank back onto the chaise, suddenly exhausted. "Tonight I almost died because your son believed I was the traitor, because someone used forged letters to make him doubt me. And all the while the real secret was sitting in the heart of his own family." Victoria flinched as though struck. "But I also know what it feels like," Isabella went on, "to love someone so completely that you'd carve pieces of yourself away to keep them safe, to carry secrets because the truth would shatter them." A tear finally escaped Victoria's eye. She didn't wipe it away. "I never wanted Damien to look at me the way he'll look at me now, like I'm a stranger." "He already feels like a stranger to me," Isabella whispered. The confession slipped out before she could cage it. "He held claws to my throat tonight, Victoria. My mate, the man I gave my soul to. And part of me still wants to run to him, to hold him, to believe we can fix this." Victoria crossed the room then, slow, careful, and knelt before the chaise. She didn't touch Isabella, but the gesture felt like an offering. "I'm sorry," she said, "for my part in this pain. For every moment I let weakness erode the trust of this pack. For every lie that led to claws at your throat." Isabella stared at the older woman's bowed head. Something inside her cracked open. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a fragile understanding. Sadness swelled, thick and heavy, pressing against her ribs until breathing hurt. Yet woven through it came the smallest, most unexpected thread of warmth, the strange comfort of not being alone in the wreckage. She reached out, hesitant, and rested her palm on Victoria's shoulder. Victoria covered it with her own hand, cool fingers, trembling. They stayed like that for long minutes. Two women bound by the same man, the same broken bond, the same impossible love. When Victoria finally rose, her spine straighter now, she met Isabella's eyes without flinching. "I will speak to him," she said, "tonight. Whatever he decides, banishment, exile, execution, I will accept it. But I ask one thing." Isabella waited. "Let me tell him myself, face to face. Let him see the woman who raised him confess her shame. Don't let him hear it secondhand again." Isabella nodded once. "I won't stop you." Victoria exhaled, a sound caught between relief and dread. "Thank you." She turned toward the door, then paused. He loves you, Isabella. More than he knows how to say. More than he knows how to show. Don't let tonight be the end of you both. The door closed softly behind her. Isabella remained on the chaise, staring into the dying fire. Rain lashed the windows harder now, a restless drumbeat that matched her heartbeat. She thought of Damien out there in the dark. Wet, furious, fighting shadows both outside and within. Thought of the way his voice had cracked when he said, "I'm sorry." Thought of Victoria's tear-streaked face, the quiet dignity in her surrender. Pain curled tight around her heart, sharp and familiar. But beneath it, small, stubborn, luminous, a smile ghosted across her lips. Not joy, not yet, just the fragile, flickering certainty that truth, no matter how brutal, was finally rising to the surface. And maybe, just maybe, truth was the only thing strong enough to hold them together when everything else had shattered. Somewhere beyond the walls, a lone wolf howled, a long, mournful cry that rose and fell like a question. Isabella closed her eyes. She didn't know the answer, but she knew she would face whatever came next with her head high. And that tonight felt like enough. Far off, the rogue border fires flickered against the storm-black sky. And in their glow, a figure waited. Marcus, arms folded, eyes fixed on the pack house like a predator measuring the distance to its prey. Chapter 4 whispers in the dark. The lone wolf's howl faded into the storm, swallowed by wind and rain, leaving only the soft patter against stone and the crackle of the hearth's last embers. Isabella remained seated on the chaise long after Victoria's footsteps had disappeared down the corridor. Her palm still carried the faint warmth of the dowager's hand, a small human imprint that refused to fade. She rose eventually, moving like someone waking from a dream that had turned sharp. The ruined gown felt heavier now, clinging to her skin with damp memories. She peeled it away slowly, letting the white silk pool at her feet like shed moonlight, then wrapped herself in the thick robe that hung behind the door. The fabric was soft, scented faintly with cedar, and the ghost of Damien's cologne from nights when he'd draped it over her shoulders after they'd made love until dawn. She crossed to the small writing desk beneath the window and lit the single candle there. Its flame danced, throwing long shadows across the room. From the hidden drawer, she withdrew the small bundle of letters, the proof she'd never wanted to use. Yellowed paper, elegant script that belonged to Victoria, words that spoke of stolen nights and aching longing. Isabella had read them only once before tonight. The second time would have felt like betrayal of her own conscience. She laid them out now, not to reread, but to decide. Burn them? Hide them deeper? Deliver them to Damien herself so Victoria would not have to face his eyes alone? Her fingers hovered over the wax seals, cracked and fragile. A soft creak in the hallway made her freeze. The door eased open without a knock. Damien stepped inside, rain-soaked cloak dripping dark pools onto the rug. He closed the door behind him with deliberate quiet. His chest rose and fell too quickly, as though he'd run the entire distance from the border rather than ridden. Their eyes met across the candlelit room. He looked like a man who had fought gods and lost. "Is she still here?" he asked, voice low and hoarse. "She left a little while ago." Isabella kept her tone even. "She asked to speak to you herself." He nodded once, a jerky motion. Water slid from the ends of his hair, tracing slow paths down his neck. He made no move to wipe it away. "I found the first letter," he said. "The one you mentioned. In the old archive tower, tucked inside a book of pack law no one has opened in decades." His gaze dropped to the spread of papers on the desk. Recognition flashed across his face, pain, sharp and immediate. "You kept them all." "I kept them because I hoped I'd never need them." He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping just short of the desk. Close enough that she could feel the chill radiating from his wet clothes, the heat beneath it. "I read enough," he continued. "Enough to know you weren't lying. Enough to know I held claws to the wrong throat tonight." Isabella looked up at him. The candlelight carved hollows beneath his cheekbones, turned his eyes almost black. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said quietly. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. I just needed to see you. To make sure you were still breathing. Still here." Her throat tightened. "I'm here." He exhaled. A ragged sound. Then, slowly, he reached out. Not to touch her, but to brush one fingertip along the edge of the nearest letter. The motion was careful, almost reverent, as though the paper might crumble under the weight of what it carried. "She was always so strong," he murmured. "After my father died, she held the pack together with nothing but will and grief. I never saw the cracks, never thought to look." Isabella watched his face. "None of us see the cracks in the people we love until they widen." His eyes lifted to hers. "I saw yours tonight, when I pressed claws here." His gaze dropped to the faint red line still visible at her throat. His hand rose, hovering an inch from her skin, trembling. "I felt them widen, and I hated myself more in that second than I have in my entire life." She caught his wrist gently, guiding his palm to rest against her cheek instead. His skin was cold from the rain, but the contact sent warmth spiraling through her anyway. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't drown in it. Not tonight." He leaned in until their foreheads touched, closed his eyes, breathed her in like she was air after drowning. They stayed that way for long minutes, two broken pieces pressed together, not quite fitting, but refusing to pull apart. When he finally spoke again, his voice was barely audible. "Tell me something true, something that isn't pain." She thought for a moment. Then softly, "I still feel the bond. Even now. Even after everything. It's quieter, bruised. But it's there. And every time it pulls, I remember the night you taught me the old pack constellations on the ridge above the river. You traced them on my back with your finger while I lay on your chest. You said the stars were just wolves who refused to die." A small, sad smile curved his mouth. "I remember. You laughed and said I was being poetic for once." "You were." Her own smile answered, fragile but real. "And I loved you for it." His thumb brushed the corner of her mouth, following the shape of that smile as though memorizing it. "I want to be that man again," he said. "The one who makes you smile under starlight instead of under threat." "Then be him," she answered simply. "One breath at a time." He nodded, a tiny motion. Then he straightened, glancing toward the window where rain still fell in silver sheets. "The border skirmish was a feint," he told her. "They wanted our eyes north while something else moved closer. The scouts lost the trail in the storm, but I can still smell it. Marcus, he's near, watching." Isabella's pulse quickened. "The scroll. The messenger I saw earlier. He carried something. I couldn't read it from the window." Damien's jaw tightened. "If he's reaching for you, it means he thinks you're the weak point now. Or the key." "I'm neither," she said firmly. "I'm your mate. That's all I've ever wanted to be." His gaze softened, fierce and tender at once. "And that's why he'll never have you." Silence settled again, softer this time. Then, from somewhere deep in the pack house, a low, mournful bell tolled, 3 measured strikes. The hour of confession. Victoria would be waiting in the great hall by now, under the eyes of the elders, ready to lay her shame bare. Damien looked toward the door. "I have to go." "I know." He hesitated. "Will you come with me?" She considered it, standing beside him while his mother spoke the words that would change everything. The thought brought a fresh wave of sorrow, but also a strange, quiet strength. "Yes," she said, "but not as your shield, as your equal." He reached for her hand, threaded their fingers together. His grip was careful, almost afraid, as though he still expected her to pull away. She didn't. They left the room side by side, candles snuffed, letters left scattered on the desk like fallen leaves. In the corridor, the torches burned low, casting long shadows that danced ahead of them. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled again, distant now, retreating. But the storm inside them was only beginning to break, and in the quiet between footsteps, Isabella felt the smallest, most stubborn flicker of hope. That truth, spoken aloud, might yet light the dark instead of consuming it. Chapter 5. Bonds Tested. The great hall smelled of old stone, beeswax, and the faint metallic tang of anticipation. Torches burned in iron brackets along the walls, their light flickering over the assembled elders, pack warriors, and a handful of trusted families who had been summoned in haste. No one spoke above a murmur. The tolling bell still echoed faintly in the rafters. Damien and Isabella entered together, hands still joined. The contact was light, barely there. but it anchored her. Heads turned. Eyes widened at the sight of her throat, the thin red line now scabbed but unmistakable. Whispers rose like smoke. Victoria waited at the far end, standing alone on the raised dais where the Alpha throne sat empty tonight. She wore simple black linen, no jewels, no Luna mantle. Her posture was straight, but her hands were clasped in front of her so tightly the knuckles showed white. Damien released Isabella's hand only when they reached the front row. He stepped forward, stopping 3 paces from his mother. The silence stretched taut. "Mother," he said. One word, it carried everything. Victoria lifted her chin. "My son. No titles, no ceremony, just the raw truth of blood and betrayal. I come to confess," she began, voice clear despite the tremor beneath it. "For years I carried on an affair with Marcus, leader of the rogue pack that has harried our borders. It began in grief after your father's death. It continued in weakness and selfishness. I shared nothing of pack strategy, no secrets of defense or supply, but I shared my heart, and in doing so, I betrayed the trust of this pack, of my mate's memory, and of you." A ripple moved through the hall, shock, anger, sorrow. One elder sucked in a sharp breath, another looked away. Victoria continued without flinching. "I accept whatever judgment the Alpha and the Council deem just. Exile, imprisonment, death. I ask only that you hear this. The fault is mine alone." Isabella knew. She held proof and chose silence until tonight, when your rage forced her hand. She protected you when I could not. Punish me. Spare her your doubt. Damien stood motionless. Isabella watched the muscle jump in his jaw, the way his hands flexed at his sides as though fighting the urge to reach for claws that weren't there. When he spoke, his voice was low, almost broken. "You raised me to value loyalty above all things. You taught me the weight of a mate bond. And then you broke both." Victoria's eyes glistened. "I know." He took one step closer. "Why?" A long silence. Then softly, "Because I was afraid to be alone with my grief. And Marcus, he made me feel seen again. Not as Luna, not as widow, just as a woman." Damien closed his eyes for a heartbeat. When he opened them, they were wet. "I don't know how to look at you now." "Then don't look," she whispered. "Look at your mate instead. She's the one who still believes in you." His gaze shifted, found Isabella. Something raw and desperate passed between them. The elders began to murmur among themselves. One rose. "The council will deliberate." "No," Damien cut in, sharp, final. "There will be no council vote tonight." He turned fully to Victoria. "You will remain under house arrest in the East Wing until I decide your fate. No visitors, no correspondence. Guards at every door." Victoria bowed her head. "As you command." "But you will live," he added, quieter, "because I cannot lose both parents in one lifetime." A sob escaped someone in the back row. Victoria's shoulders shook once, then steadied. Damien turned away. His eyes sought Isabella again. He crossed to her in 3 strides, took her hand without asking, and led her from the hall. They didn't speak until they reached the private corridor that led to the Alpha's quarters. The moment the heavy door closed behind them, Damien released her hand and leaned against the wall, head bowed, breathing hard. "I couldn't do it," he said. "I couldn't sentence her. Not tonight." Isabella stepped closer. "You didn't have to." He looked up. "I wanted to hate her. It would have been easier." "Easier isn't always right." He studied her face. "You stood there, silent, letting her speak, letting me hear it from her lips. Why?" "Because you needed to see her as a person, not just a secret." Isabella reached up, brushed a damp strand of hair from his forehead. "And because I needed you to remember that love, even flawed, even broken, is still love." His hand caught hers, held it against his cheek. "I almost lost you because I couldn't see past my own fear." "You didn't lose me," her voice cracked. "You hurt me, deeply, but I'm still here." He pulled her into his arms then, slow, careful, as though she might shatter. She went willingly, pressing her cheek to his chest. His heartbeat thundered beneath her ear, too fast, too loud. "I don't deserve this," he murmured into her hair. Maybe not, she answered, but I'm giving it anyway. He exhaled, shaky, held her tighter. Minutes passed. The storm outside had quieted to a gentle drizzle. Inside, something else began to settle. Not peace, not yet, but the first fragile scaffolding of understanding. When he finally pulled back enough to look at her, his eyes were clearer. There's something else. She waited. Before the confession was called, one of the scouts returned. They found the messenger's trail. He didn't go far. He left the scroll nailed to an oak at the edge of the western woods. Addressed to you. Isabella's stomach dropped. Me? Damien reached into his cloak and withdrew a folded parchment, sealed with black wax stamped with a broken claw, the rogue sigil. He held it out. She took it with steady hands, though her pulse raced, broke the seal. The message was short, brutally clear. Isabella, you hold the key to an old promise your mate's bloodline made long ago. Come alone to the Standing Stones at moonset tomorrow. Bring no guard. Tell no one. Refuse, and the next blood spilled will be his. She read it twice, then handed it to Damien without a word. His face darkened as he scanned the lines. He thinks he can use you against me. He thinks I'm afraid, she said quietly. Damien crushed the parchment in his fist. You're not going anywhere near those stones. I know. She met his gaze. But we need to know what promise he's talking about, what key he thinks I hold. Damien stared at her for a long moment, searching, weighing, remembering the woman who'd faced his claws and still chosen truth over silence. Then slowly he nodded. We'll find out, he said, together. He pulled her close again. This time she felt the shift. Not desperation, but quiet resolve. His lips brushed her temple, soft, lingering. I won't fail you again, he whispered. She smiled against his chest, small, sad, but real. I know. Outside, the drizzle whispered against the windows. Inside, two hearts beat closer to alignment than they had in days. But in the western woods, beneath the ancient oak, the rogue waited, patient, certain, already counting the hours until moonset. And somewhere in the pack archives, in a forgotten ledger no one had touched in generations, a single line of faded ink waited to be read. The firstborn of the Black Wolf line shall bind the rogue heart, or break it forever. Chapter 6. Echoes of the Past. The forgotten line in the ledger waited like a sleeping ember. The firstborn of the Black Wolf line shall bind the rogue heart, or break it forever. Damien stared at the page Isabella had found in the deepest shelves of the archive tower, the parchment so old it felt brittle under his fingertips. Moonlight slanted through the narrow window slits, turning the ink silver gray. He read the words again, then a third time. Isabella stood beside him, close enough that their shoulders brushed. Neither had spoken since she'd traced the line with her finger and whispered, This is what Marcus meant. The key he thinks I hold. Damien's voice came out rough. My father used to say old prophecies were half-truths written by wolves too afraid to face their own choices. He never mentioned this one. Maybe he didn't know. Isabella's tone was gentle, careful. Or maybe he knew and chose silence. The way we all choose silence sometimes. He closed the ledger slowly. The sound echoed in the high-ceilinged room like a door shutting on something irrevocable. They left the tower without another word, footsteps soft on the spiral stairs. The pack house slept around them, guards changing shift with quiet murmurs, fires banked low, the occasional distant snore from the barracks. Yet the air felt charged, as though the walls themselves were listening. They ended up in the small garden behind the Alpha's quarters, the one place no one disturbed after midnight. Roses climbed the stone walls, their scent heavy and sweet in the cool night. A stone bench sat beneath an ancient willow whose branches trailed like silver curtains. Damien sat first. Isabella hesitated, then settled beside him. Not touching, but near enough that the warmth of her body reached through the chill. For a long time, they simply breathed together. The drizzle had stopped. Stars pierced the thinning clouds in sharp, cold points. When Damien finally spoke, his voice was barely above the rustle of leaves. All my life, I thought the only blood that mattered was the one that ran strong and loyal. Black Wolf line, Alpha-born, untouchable. And now I learn there might be another thread. Rogue blood, woven in somewhere I can't see. Isabella turned her face toward him. Moonlight caught the faint scar on her throat, a pale reminder. You're more than blood, Damien. You're choices. You're the man who held back judgment on his own mother tonight. The man who came to my door dripping rain and regret instead of rage. He looked at her then. Really looked. And you're the woman who could have let me drown in that rage. Who could have walked away when I gave you every reason. Yet here you are. Again. A small, aching smile touched her lips. Here I am. He reached out slowly, palm up. An invitation, not a demand. She placed her hand in his. Their fingers laced without hurry. His thumb traced slow circles over her knuckles. Small, grounding motions that said more than words could. I keep thinking about the night we met. He murmured. You were standing at the edge of the solstice bonfire. Hair loose, eyes bright with that quiet fire you carry. I felt the bond snap into place before I even knew your name. Like the world had been out of tune my whole life and someone finally turned the right note. Isabella's breath caught. I felt it too, like falling and flying at the same time. He lifted their joined hands, pressed a soft kiss to her wrist. Not possessive, just grateful. I want to go back to that feeling. Not the blind certainty of new love. The deeper one. The one that knows exactly how much it can hurt and chooses anyway. Tears pricked her eyes. Not from pain this time, but from the raw beauty of hearing him say it aloud. She blinked them away. Then let's choose it. One honest breath at a time. He nodded. Pulled her closer until her head rested against his shoulder. They sat like that, wrapped in willow shadows and starlight, while the night deepened around them. Eventually he spoke again, quieter, the prophecy. If there's truth in it, Marcus believes you're the binding piece, or the breaking one. Either way, he wants you at those stones tomorrow. I won't go alone, she said firmly, and I won't go as bait. No. His arm tightened around her. We'll go together. We'll hear what he has to say. And if he tries to take you... His voice hardened, then softened again. We face it side by side. No more secrets between us. She lifted her head to meet his gaze. No more secrets. A promise. Simple, heavy, true. They stayed in the garden until the first gray light of false dawn brushed the eastern sky. When they finally rose, stiff from the cold stone bench, Damien kept her hand in his as they walked back inside. At the door to her chambers, he paused. Sleep, he said gently. I'll post extra guards. I'll be 2 doors down if you need me. She squeezed his hand once before letting go. I know. He lingered a moment longer, eyes tracing her face as though memorizing every line. Then he turned and walked away. Slow, reluctant, but certain. Isabella closed the door softly behind her. She didn't light a candle. Didn't undress. She simply crossed to the bed and curled on top of the covers, still wearing the robe that carried his scent. Exhaustion pulled at her like deep water, but sleep came slowly, laced with the echo of his voice, the press of his thumb on her wrist, the fragile new weight of shared truth. Outside, the pack house settled into the hush before dawn. Far beyond the western woods, at the circle of standing stones, Marcus stood alone beneath the fading stars. He held no scroll now, just a small, tarnished silver locket that had once belonged to Victoria. Inside it, pressed between glass, lay a single dark strand of hair. He closed the locket with a soft click. Soon, he murmured to the empty night. The stones around him seemed to lean in, listening. And somewhere in the distance, a young wolf, barely more than a pup, watched from the tree line, eyes wide, heart pounding with the secret he'd been ordered to carry. The alpha's mate was not the only one with rogue blood in her veins. The pup turned and slipped back into the shadows, carrying the knowledge that could shatter everything. Chapter 7. Captive Hearts. The pup slipped away from the tree, line before the first true light of morning, touched the stones. His small paws carried him back through underbrush and bracken, heart hammering with the weight of what he'd overheard and what he now carried in his mind like stolen fire. Rogue blood in the alpha's mate. The words felt too big for his young chest, too dangerous to hold alone. He didn't stop running until he reached the hidden camp at the edge of the neutral lands, where Marcus waited beside a low fire. The rogue leader looked up as the pup skidded to a halt, panting. Marcus said nothing at first, just studied the boy with those cold, assessing eyes. Then he extended a hand. The pup dropped to one knee, head bowed, and whispered the secret he'd been told to guard with his life. Marcus listened without expression. When the pup finished, the man simply nodded once. "Good," he said quietly. "Go eat, tell no one else." The pup scrambled away, relieved and terrified in equal measure. Marcus remained by the fire, staring into the flames. The silver locket turned slowly between his fingers. He opened it again, gazed at the single dark strand of hair. Isabella's hair, taken months ago during a border skirmish she never knew happened. He closed it with the same soft click. "So it begins," he murmured to the empty dawn. Back at the pack house, Isabella woke to the sound of urgent voices in the corridor outside her door. She sat up fast, robe slipping from one shoulder, heart already racing before her mind caught up. The door burst open without a knock. Damien stood there, cloak half on, eyes wild. Behind him, 2 guards flanked a breathless scout whose uniform was torn and mud-streaked. "They took her," the scout gasped before Damien could speak. "During the dawn patrol change. 4 rogues, fast, silent. They had her before anyone raised the alarm." Isabella felt the floor tilt beneath her. "Who?" she asked, though the sick certainty already coiled in her gut. The scout's gaze darted to Damien, then back to her. "You, Luna, they took you. Or they tried." Damien stepped forward, voice low and lethal. "They dragged a decoy from the gardens. One of the younger she-wolves who looks enough like you in the half-light. She fought. They knocked her out. By the time the patrol realized the real trail was cold, Isabella pressed a hand to her mouth. Relief warred with horror. Someone else had paid the price for a mistake meant for her. Damien crossed to her in 2 strides, gripped her shoulders, not hard, but firm enough to steady them both. "You're safe for now, but they wanted you." Badly enough to risk daylight. She searched his face. "The prophecy, the rogue heart. They think I'm the piece that binds or breaks it." He nodded once. "And they're not waiting for moonset anymore." The room spun with sudden motion. Orders barked, maps unrolled on the nearest table, scouts dispatched in every direction. Isabella moved through it like someone underwater, helping where she could, marking possible routes on the parchment, suggesting weak points in the border wards she'd studied during quieter months. But inside, fear gnawed. Not just for herself, for the young she-wolf now lying in the infirmary with a concussion and bruises that should have been hers. For the pack now looking at her with a mix of pity and suspicion. For Damien, whose every barked command carried an undercurrent of barely leashed terror. By mid-morning, the search parties were out. Damien refused to stay behind. He pulled Isabella aside in the shadowed alcove near the armory, away from prying eyes. "I'm going with the eastern flank," he told her. "Fastest trail. You stay here. Locked down. Triple guard." "No." His brows snapped together. "Isabella, I'm not hiding while others bleed for me." Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled. "If Marcus wants me, let him see me coming. On my terms. With you." He stared at her, long, searching. Then something shifted in his eyes. Not defeat, but fierce, aching pride. "You'll ride with me," he said finally. "But you stay at my side. No heroics, no separating. Swear it." "I swear." He pulled her into a brief, crushing embrace, forehead to hers, breath ragged. "If anything happens to you—" "It won't," she whispered, "because we're ending this together." They rode out within the hour. Damien at the head, Isabella mounted behind him on his great black stallion, arms wrapped around his waist. The wind tore at her cloak as they galloped across open fields toward the neutral lands. The pack warriors fanned out in wings, silent and swift. Hours blurred into a rhythm of pounding hooves and straining lungs. The trail grew fresher near dusk. Broken branches, the faint metallic scent of rogue fur. They slowed to a cautious trot as the forest thickened. That was when the trap sprang. A net of weighted ropes dropped from the canopy. Damien's stallion reared. He twisted, shielding Isabella with his body as they both went down. Pain exploded in her shoulder as she hit the ground hard. Shouts erupted. Pack warriors clashing with rogues who melted from the trees like smoke. Damien was on his feet in an instant, claws extended, roaring orders. Isabella scrambled up, drawing the dagger at her belt, heart slamming against her ribs. Then hands, rough, strong, seized her from behind. a cloth pressed over her mouth, sharp with herbs. She fought, elbow driving back, heel stomping, but the world tilted, darkened. The last thing she saw was Damien turning, eyes wide with raw panic, reaching for her as the rogues dragged her into the undergrowth. When she woke, the world was stone and shadow. She lay on a rough pallet in what looked like an old cave system. Damp walls, flickering torchlight, the distant drip of water. Her wrists were bound with rope, not chains. Her dagger gone. No gag. They wanted her awake, talking. Footsteps approached. Marcus stepped into the light. Older than she remembered from border sightings. Silver threading his dark hair, lines carved deep around his mouth, but the same cold intelligence in his eyes. "You're awake," he said simply. No triumph, no gloating, just fact. "Where am I?" Her voice came out hoarse. "Far enough that your mate won't find you quickly. Close enough that he'll tear himself apart looking." She sat up slowly, ignoring the throb in her head. "What do you want?" He crouched to her level, elbows on knees. "The truth your pack has forgotten. The promise your bloodline made to mine generations ago. The prophecy. More than prophecy. Pact." He pulled the locket from his pocket, opened it, held it out. The dark strand inside caught the torchlight. "Your mother, before she mated your father, was promised to my father, a union to end the wars. She chose your father instead, broke the vow. My father never recovered. The rogue pack splintered because of it. I grew up on stories of the black wolf who stole our future." Isabella stared at the hair. "That's not mine." "No," Marcus said quietly. "It's your mother's, kept by my father until his death. Passed to me, a reminder." She felt the ground shift beneath her. "You think I'm... what? Compensation? I think you're the key to mending what was broken. Bind the lines again. Unite rogue and pack under one banner. Or watch everything burn because the old wound never closed." She laughed, short, bitter. "You think kidnapping me will make Damien agree to anything?" "I think losing you will make him desperate enough to listen." He rose. "Rest. You'll need strength for what comes next." He walked away, leaving her alone with the torch's unsteady light and the echo of his words. Isabella pressed her bound hands to her chest, feeling the faint, steady pull of the bond. Distant now, stretched thin, but unbroken. Somewhere out there, Damien was searching, bleeding, breaking. She closed her eyes and smiled, small, fierce, tear-streaked. Because even chained in darkness, she knew one truth that Marcus never would. Love forged in fire didn't break. It burned hotter, and she would burn until she found her way back to him. Chapter 8. Veils of Deception. Isabella sat against the rough cave wall, knees drawn to her chest, bound wrists resting on them. The torch Marcus had left burned low, throwing long, unsteady shadows that made the stone seem to breathe. Hours had passed, or minutes. Time blurred in the dark, measured only by the slow drip of water somewhere deeper in the tunnels and the faint, persistent tug of the mate bond. It was still there. Thinner than thread, stretched across miles of forest and fear, but alive. Every pulse carried the echo of Damien's heartbeat, fast, furious, frantic. She closed her eyes and leaned into it, letting the distant rhythm steady her own. She didn't cry. Not yet. Tears would come later, when the adrenaline faded and the reality of captivity settled like damp rot. For now, she held onto the fire inside her chest. Small, fierce, unyielding. The same fire that had made her stand still while claws hovered at her throat. The same fire that had chosen forgiveness over flight. Footsteps echoed again, lighter this time, not Marcus's heavy tread. A young rogue woman appeared at the mouth of the alcove. Barely 20, dark braids falling over one shoulder, eyes wide with something between curiosity and guilt. She carried a wooden bowl of stew and a water skin. "Eat," she said quietly, setting both on the ground just out of reach. "He said you need strength." Isabella studied her. "What's your name?" The girl hesitated. "Lyra." "Lyra." Isabella kept her voice soft even. "How long have you been with them?" "Since I was 12. My pack was scattered in a raid. Marcus took us in, gave us purpose." "And what purpose is that?" Lyra looked away. to take back what was stolen, to make the packs remember we're not just shadows. Isabella nodded slowly. And kidnapping me? That's how you do it? Lyra's jaw tightened. You're the bridge, that's what he says. Your blood carries the old promise. The promise my mother broke. Lyra's eyes flicked back, surprised. You know? I know enough. Isabella shifted, wincing as the rope chafed her wrists. But promises made by people long dead shouldn't chain the living. Not you, not me, not him. Lyra swallowed. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Fragile, electric. Then the girl whispered. He's not cruel, not really, just broken, like the rest of us. Isabella met her gaze. Broken things can still cut. Lyra looked down at the bowl, pushed it closer with her foot. Eat, please. She turned to leave. Wait, Isabella said. Lyra paused. If you ever want to know what life looks like without carrying someone else's old wound, find me. When this ends. Lyra's shoulders stiffened. She didn't answer, but she didn't hurry away either. Her footsteps faded slowly, thoughtfully. Isabella ate what she could. Simple broth, root vegetables, a little bread. Strength, not surrender. She was wiping her mouth with the back of her bound hands when the cave mouth darkened again. This time it was Marcus, alone. He stopped just inside the torchlight, arms folded. You spoke to Lyra. She spoke to me. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth, sad, almost fond. She's soft-hearted, too soft for what's coming. And what is coming? He stepped closer, crouched again, eye level. A message has been sent. Your mate will receive it at dawn. Simple terms. Meet me at the Standing Stones at high sun tomorrow. Bring the elders who remember the old packs. Bring proof of lineage. In exchange, you walk free. Refuse, and the next piece of you he finds will be in pieces. Isabella's stomach turned cold. You think he'll agree? I think he'll tear the world apart looking for another way first. Marcus tilted his head. But he'll come, because losing you would break him worse than any blade. She searched his face. And if he comes, what then? You force a union neither of us wants? No. His voice dropped. I force acknowledgement. The rogue packs are dying, scattered, starving, hunted. Your pack thrives. One public admission that the lines were meant to merge once, that the wars were built on betrayal. It gives us legitimacy, land, peace, a future. And if we refuse? Then the wars continue, until one side is ash. Isabella leaned forward as far as the ropes allowed. You're asking us to rewrite history to save your people, but you're doing it with threats and blood. That's not legitimacy. That's conquest dressed in old grief. Marcus's eyes flickered, something raw flashing through the calm mask. Grief is all we have left. Then let it end with us, she said quietly. Not pass to the next generation. Not to pups like the one who watched me from the trees last night. Not to Lyra. He stared at her for a long beat, then rose. You speak like someone who still believes in mercy. I speak like someone who's seen what happens when mercy dies. He turned to leave, paused at the threshold. Your mother chose love over duty, he said without looking back. Maybe you'll choose differently. The torch sputtered, shadows lengthened. Isabella sat in silence after he was gone, feeling the bond pulse stronger now, closer, urgent. Damien was moving, fast, relentless. She pressed her forehead to her knees and let one tear fall. Then another. Not weakness. Release. The ache of knowing how much he would suffer tonight, how many borders he would cross, how many risks he would take, and beneath the sorrow, a fierce, bright thread of joy. He was coming for her. Not out of duty, not out of possession. Out of the same stubborn, bruised love that had kept her standing when claws met throat. She lifted her head, smiled through the tears, small, defiant, luminous. Let them come, she whispered to the dark. Let them all come. Miles away, in the pack house war room, Damien stood over a map stained with fresh ink and old blood. Scouts had just returned, 2 wounded, 1 missing. The message from Marcus lay open on the table, its black wax seal shattered. The elders argued in low, urgent voices. Some called for siege, others for negotiation. One suggested sacrifice, leave her, cut the loss. Damien's fist slammed down, the table cracked. "No one leaves her," he said, voice low and lethal. "No one." He looked up, met every eye in the room. "We ride at first light, full strength. We meet him at the stones. We hear his terms. And if he so much as looks at her wrong," his claws extended with a soft, lethal snick, "we end it." Silence fell. Then Victoria, still under guard, but present by special order, stepped forward from the shadows. "Let me go with you," she said quietly. Damien turned. "Why?" "Because I broke the promise once. Let me help mend what I can." He studied her, long, searching, then nodded once. "Be ready at dawn." As the room emptied, Damien remained alone with the map. He traced the line to the standing stones with one finger. Slow, deliberate. "I'm coming," he whispered to the empty air. And somewhere deep underground, Isabella felt the words in her bones. She smiled again, sad and shining. The veils of deception were tearing, and what lay beneath might yet save them all. Chapter 9. Forged in Fire. Dawn broke cold and clear over the neutral lands, the sky a thin, pale blade of light that cut through the mist. Damien stood at the head of the pack column, 200 wolves strong, half-shifted, half-human, watching the standing stones rise like ancient teeth from the fog-shrouded plain. The wind carried the scent of pine, damp earth, and something sharper. Rogue fur, leather, and the faint metallic promise of blood. Victoria rode at his left flank, silent, eyes fixed forward. No guards flanked her now. She had asked to come unbound, and Damien, after a long, wordless look, had agreed. Isabella's absence burned between them like an open wound, but neither spoke of it. Words felt too small for what waited ahead. Behind them, the elders murmured low prayers to the moon goddess, their voices weaving with the creak of saddles and the soft jingle of weapons. Every warrior carried the same quiet fury, a mate stolen, a line threatened, a future hanging by the thread of one woman's courage. Damien lifted a hand. The column halted. He dismounted, boots sinking into dew-soaked grass. Victoria followed. Together they walked the last 100 paces alone, the stones looming taller with every step. At the center circle stood Marcus, alone, arms loose at his sides, no visible weapon. But the air around him crackled with the presence of unseen rogues hidden in the mist and trees. Damien stopped 10 paces away, Victoria 1 step behind. "Where is she?" His voice carried across the clearing, low, lethal, stripped of everything but need. Marcus inclined his head. "Safe, close. She'll be brought when the terms are met." "Terms," Damien repeated, the word tasting like ash. "Speak them." Marcus's gaze flicked to Victoria. "First, acknowledgement. Public. Before these stones. Before witnesses from both sides. The old pact. Your bloodline's firstborn was promised to mine. The breach caused generations of war. Admit it. Here, now." Damien's claws flexed involuntarily. "And second?" "Second. Alliance. Shared borders. Shared hunts. No more hunts on rogue packs. Equal voice in council when matters touch both peoples." Victoria stepped forward before Damien could answer. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled at her sides. "I broke that promise," she said. "Not my mate, not my son, me. I chose love over duty. I carried the shame alone. If acknowledgement must be spoken, let it come from my lips." Marcus studied her, long, searching. Something flickered in his expression, not hatred, but the ghost of old sorrow. "Then speak it," he said. Victoria lifted her chin. The wind tugged at her silver-streaked hair. "I, Victoria of the Black Wolf line, widow of the former Alpha, confess before the moon goddess and these witnesses. Generations ago, a vow was made between our peoples, a union to end bloodshed. My predecessor's daughter was to bind the lines. She chose otherwise. In my time, echoed that choice. I loved where I should have served. Because of it, rogue packs suffered. Pack wolves died. The wound never closed." Her voice cracked once, only once. "I am sorry." Silence fell, thick and heavy. Marcus exhaled slowly. And you, Alpha? Do you stand by her words? Damien met his eyes. I stand by my mother. I stand by my mate. If this admission ends the cycle, if it gives Isabella back to me whole, then yes, I acknowledge the old breach, and I offer alliance. Equal, not conquest. Marcus nodded once. Then call her. A sharp whistle cut the air. From the mist behind the stones emerged Lyra, supporting Isabella between her and another rogue. Isabella's wrists were unbound now, though red marks still circled them. Her cloak was torn, her hair wild, but her eyes, gods, her eyes, found Damien's across the distance and held. She walked the rest of the way alone. When she reached the circle, she stopped beside Damien, not touching, not yet, but close enough that the bond flared bright between them, sudden and searing. Isabella looked at Marcus. You have your words, your acknowledgement. Now keep yours. Marcus inclined his head. You're free. She didn't move. Not yet. Not until I say something too. All eyes turned to her. She drew a slow breath. I am not my mother. I am not my mate's mother. I carry no old promise on my shoulders. But I carry love. For this man. For this pack. For the possibility that rogue and pack don't have to be enemies forever. If alliance is what you want, then let it be built on truth, not threat, not chains, not blood taken by force. She turned to Damien. Tears shimmered but did not fall. And if you'll have me still, after doubt, after claws, after everything, I choose you. Again. Not because of any bond the goddess wove, but because I see you. The man who came through rain to apologize. The man who held back judgment on his own mother. The man who tore across borders to find me. I choose that man. Every day. Every hard day. Damien's throat worked. He reached for her hand. Slow, reverent, their fingers laced. I choose you, he said, voice rough with everything he couldn't yet name. Always. The bond hummed, stronger now, brighter, a living flame between them. Marcus watched the exchange, then quietly, the pact is mended, not with marriage, with choice. He stepped back, raised a hand. The hidden rogues emerged, dozens, silent, watchful, but no one drew a blade. We withdraw, Marcus said. Alliance talks begin at the next full moon. Neutral ground. Bring your elders. We'll bring ours. He looked at Isabella one last time. Thank you, for speaking mercy when you could have spoken hate. Then he turned. The rogues melted back into the mist like smoke. Only Lyra lingered a moment longer. She met Isabella's eyes, gave one small nod, then followed her people. The clearing emptied. Only pack wolves remained. Damien, Isabella, Victoria, the elders, the warriors. Victoria stepped forward first. She reached out, hesitant, and touched Isabella's cheek. Thank you, she whispered, for giving my son back his heart. Isabella covered Victoria's hand with her own. We're giving each other back, all of us. Victoria's eyes filled. She pulled Isabella into a brief, fierce embrace, mother to daughter in all but blood. Then she stepped away, giving them space. Damien turned to Isabella fully now. His hands cupped her face, gentle, trembling. I thought I'd lost you, he said. You almost did. She smiled, small, tear-bright. But you didn't. He rested his forehead against hers, closed his eyes, breathed her in. Around them the pack began to move, quietly, respectfully, withdrawing to give their alpha and his mate the moment they'd earned. But before they left the stones entirely, Damien lifted his head. Tonight, he said to the elders, loud enough to carry, we hold the renewal rite, under this same moon. No more shadows, no more secrets. We renew the bond, publicly, so the goddess and every wolf here sees it. Murmurs of assent rose. Isabella's smile widened, sad edges softening into something warmer, brighter. Together, she whispered. Together, he answered. They walked back to the pack column hand in hand, slow, deliberate, heads high. Behind them, the standing stones stood silent, ancient witnesses to a fracture finally beginning to heal. And far above, the sun climbed higher, burning away the last wisps of mist. Forged in fire, not broken, remade. Chapter 10. Eternal Bonds. The pack returned to the heart of their territory, under a sky that had softened to the color of bruised lavender. No triumphant howls rose from the column. Only quiet, steady footfalls and the occasional soft murmur between warriors. Exhaustion clung to them like mist, but so did something brighter. The knowledge that the fracture they had feared might swallow them whole had instead begun to mend. Isabella rode in front of Damien this time, his arms bracketing her on the stallion's back, chin resting lightly against her shoulder. Neither spoke much during the journey. Words felt unnecessary when every shared breath, every subtle shift of weight, carried the same message. We're here. We're still here. By the time the pack house came into view, torches already lit along the walls, windows glowing warm against the gathering dusk. The moon had risen full and heavy. Silver light washed the courtyard, turning cobblestones to liquid mercury. Damien helped her down first, hands lingering at her waist a heartbeat longer than needed. She felt the tremor in his fingers, the last echo of terror he hadn't yet released. The renewal rite had been prepared in haste, but with reverence. In the center of the great courtyard, a circle of white stones had been laid fresh that afternoon. At its heart burned a low fire of cedar and sage, smoke curling upward in fragrant spirals. The elders stood at cardinal points, robes of deep indigo catching the moonlight. Pack members formed a loose ring beyond them. Hundreds of eyes, all quiet, all waiting. Victoria waited at the eastern edge of the circle, no longer under guard. She wore the simple black linen from the confession, but a thin silver chain now circled her throat, a small, deliberate symbol of release rather than restraint. Damien led Isabella to the fire's edge. They stopped just outside the white stones. He turned to face her fully. The moonlight carved his features sharp and tender at once, shadows pooling beneath his eyes, but the blue of them clear, unguarded. "Isabella," he began, voice carrying without effort across the silent courtyard. "I stood before you once with claws at your throat and doubt in my heart. I accused you of the very betrayal I was too blind to see in my own blood. I threatened the one person the moon goddess bound to me forever." A soft ripple of breath moved through the gathered pack. Sorrow, understanding, no judgment. He continued, quieter now, though no less steady. "Tonight I stand before you again. Not as Alpha, not as king, just as Damien. The man who failed you. The man who almost lost you. The man who will spend every breath left in him earning back what I nearly destroyed." He reached into the inner pocket of his cloak and withdrew a small silver ring, simple, unadorned, etched with the faint outline of a crescent moon and a running wolf. He had commissioned it months ago, before doubt had poisoned everything, intending it for their first anniversary. He held it between them. "I offer this not as replacement for the mark on your neck," he said, "but as promise beyond instinct, beyond bond. I choose you every day, in light, in shadow, in rage and in regret. I choose you." Isabella's vision blurred. She blinked once, twice. Then she lifted her left hand. "I accept," she whispered. Her voice strengthened as she spoke the next words. "And I choose you back. Not because fate demands it. Not because claws once threatened and mercy was given. I choose the man who knelt in rain at my door. The man who listened to his mother's confession without turning away. The man who rode through fire to bring me home. I choose that man. Every day. Every hard day." Damien slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, cool metal warming instantly against her skin. Then he lifted her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to the ring, to her knuckles, to the pulse at her wrist. The elders stepped forward as one. They raised their arms. A low chant rose, ancient words of binding, of renewal, of forgiveness woven into the night air. Damien drew Isabella into the circle of white stones. They knelt together before the fire. He took her other hand. Their foreheads touched. "Goddess," he murmured, loud enough only for her. "If you still listen to broken wolves, thank you. For her. For this second chance." Isabella smiled against his skin, tears slipping free now, warm tracks down her cheeks. Thank you, she echoed. For him. For us. The chant swelled around them, rose to the moon, then fell away into profound silence. When they rose, the pack erupted, not in howls of dominance, but in soft, joyful cries. Pups yipped, elders bowed heads, warriors thumped fists to chests in quiet salute. Victoria approached last. She stopped before them, eyes shining. May your bond be stronger than the one I broke, she said softly. May your children know only trust. Isabella reached out, pulled Victoria into the circle with them. The three stood together, mother, son, daughter by choice, hands linked. The fire flared brighter for a single heartbeat, as though the goddess herself had nodded. Then the rite ended. The pack dispersed slowly, some to feast, some to rest, many simply to breathe in the new air that felt lighter than it had in years. Damien and Isabella lingered in the courtyard long after the torches began to gutter. They sat on the low stone wall that bordered the rose garden, shoulders touching, the silver ring catching moonlight every time she moved her hand. I thought we'd lost this, he said quietly. We almost did. She leaned her head on his shoulder. But almost isn't the same as gone. He turned his face into her hair. Inhaled. Exhaled. A long, shuddering breath that carried the last of the fear he'd carried for days. I love you, he said, simple, plain, devastating in its honesty. She lifted her head, met his eyes. I love you too. They kissed then, slow, deep, unhurried, not claiming, not desperate, just home. When they parted, a small, real smile curved his mouth, the kind she hadn't seen since before the accusations, before the claws. Tomorrow, he murmured, we begin the alliance talks. We face whatever prophecy still lingers. We build something new. Together, she answered. Together. Above them, the full moon watched, steady, silent, approving. And somewhere in the distance, in the neutral lands, Marcus sat by his own small fire. He opened the tarnished locket one last time, looked at the strand of hair that had once belonged to a woman who chose differently. He closed it, tossed it into the flames, watched it burn clean. Then he stood, turned toward the horizon where the packlands lay, and, for the first time in years, allowed himself the smallest flicker of hope. The wars were not over, but the possibility of peace had finally been born. And in the packhouse courtyard, beneath that same moon, Isabella rested her head against Damien's chest once more, listened to the strong, steady beat of his heart. She smiled, soft, luminous, unafraid, eternal, not because fate demanded it, but because they had chosen it. If this story touched you, if your heart ached when claws met throat, if it lifted when two broken souls chose each other again under the moon, if you smiled through tears at the quiet promise of together after everything tried to tear them apart, then please don't let the moonlight fade just yet. Share this tale with someone who needs to remember that love, real, bruised, stubborn love, can survive even the darkest accusations. Drop a comment telling me which moment broke you open the most, or which line made you believe in second chances again. Tag a friend who deserves to feel this kind of hope. Save it, reread it on nights when trust feels fragile, and let Isabella and Damien remind you that choosing each other is always worth the fight. Your words, your shares, your quiet Me Too moments, they keep this bond alive far beyond the page. Thank you for walking through the fire with them. Thank you for staying until the end. Now go hold someone a little tighter tonight. They might just need it.